As it's getting a little bit warmer, but there's still some snow on the ground, we're looking to spring forward with some daylight savings. It's now time to talk with our monthly West Bloomfield Parks Naturalist segment, where we're going to learn some more about nature and that surrounds us in our greater West Bloomfield area. Joining us today to talk about that is Lauren Azoury. Lauren, thanks so much for joining us this morning.
Hi, Maddie. Good morning. Thanks for having me.
So, Lauren, as we are springing forward, daylight savings time has finally hit. We're looking now into spring, and that means that the spring wildlife will be out and about in our greater West Bloomfield community. Can you talk a little bit about some of the spring wildlife that we can look forward to seeing this spring?
Absolutely. I've already started hearing some of the birds singing more, and pretty soon, hopefully, we'll get to hear our spring peepers, which are the first frogs to sing in the spring. Things are definitely warming up, and the light cycles are changing. So they go by, nature goes by the light. They go by the sun, the circadian rhythm. So they don't have iPads or, Alexa to tell us that spring is here. They go by the light cycles, and it is changing. The days are getting longer. So there's definitely gonna be some great signs of spring out there.
So Lauren, with the spring wildlife that is going to be out and about, sometimes people in our greater West Bloomfield community might come across some animals that are either injured or abandoned. You guys get calls at West Bloomfield Parks with concerned citizens saying, what do I do now that I have found this injured or abandoned animal? Can you tell us a little bit about what first they should look for to tell if an animal is either injured or if they're just abandoned?
Yeah, I would say the most common phone calls we get in the spring are about baby animals because, of course, spring is when all the new babies are being born out there. Oftentimes it's baby rabbits or fawns, as well as birds. And so the one thing that I always say, everyone has the best intentions, of course. Everyone wants to help, which is great. But oftentimes, often than not, the wildlife is better left wild. So we need to just learn a little bit about these spring babies and what they need and what's happening in their lives so that they might not actually need our human interaction or our human help. They probably have an adult nearby and we just don't see them. So the best example is a fawn. I oftentimes get calls that say, I have a fawn, it's been abandoned, it's in my yard and it's been there and I haven't seen the mom. So what happens with fawns is when they're born with no scent at all, and they've got great camouflage. So they're meant to be left alone. Sometimes their moms won't come back throughout the whole day to even check on them. And that's actually to protect them. So the mom has a scent and predators can follow scents. The baby does not have a scent. So the more often the mom comes to the baby, it actually puts the baby at higher risk for predators. So what we think might be an abandoned fawn, most often the mom is nearby watching and just not coming close. And they usually come to visit dawn and dusk. So what we think of as an abandoned fawn is usually just a fawn that's got good camouflage and is staying safe from predators. Similar with the baby bird. So a lot of times in the spring, birds are found on the ground and they're actually learning to fly. It's called a fledgling. So if you find a baby bird that is on the ground, if it has any kind of feathers whatsoever, and it might be like flopping around, might look a little awkward to us, really it's just learning. So a nestling bird with no feathers and eyes might be still closed, that might need some human help. You can look for the nest up in the tree and place it back up in the tree. One of those common old wives' tales is that if you touch a bird, the mom will not come back because of scent. But actually, most often, baby birds or even adult birds don't have a great sense of smell. So us helping that bird put it back in the nest is not going to deter the mom from coming back to care for the bird or bring it food later. But if it is a bird with feathers flopping around on the ground, it's usually just learning, and the mom is nearby looking on, and we just can't see them.
Lauren, for those animals that may be injured to our eyes, obviously you can tell if an animal is either injured in comparison to if they're just abandoned. What do you do if you find an injured animal in our community?
Yeah, so at West Bloomfield Parks, our naturalist staff is always happy to answer questions. So when in doubt, just give us a call. It's 248-451-1900. A lot of our customer service staff has been trained in how to answer these kinds of phone calls, as well as our naturalist staff. And we can kind of help you walk through what might be the scenario. Is this something that needs intervening, or is it something that the animal, this is a natural behavior? But if it is very visibly injured, limping, acting erratically, things like that, you would need to call a licensed rehabilitator. So even most nature centers don't even have a licensed rehabilitator on staff. Some do, Howell Nature Center is a great resource for that. We often call them as well if we have injured wildlife, but we do not have a licensed rehabilitator. By this DNR has to give those license, and you go through testing and training for that. So you can look on the DNR website, and there's a list of licensed rehabilitators listed by county, and they are a wealth of knowledge and a great resource, as well as they do take in wildlife in the spring if they are truly injured. So you can always call your local naturalist or your local nature center, kind of talk through the steps, figure out what needs to be done. And then after that, you'd need to find a licensed rehabilitator if it turns out that that wildlife is actually truly abandoned or is injured.
And Lauren, I feel like, me personally, in the spring, you may come across either a raccoon or another animal that you see during the day that sometimes you don't see during the day. I've heard from other people that if you see a raccoon or something like that during the day, it might be injured or it might have some issues. For you guys at West Bloomfield Parks on the naturalist staff, if you get these phone calls where there are certain animals, are there certain animals that you should look out for during the day that don't normally come out during the day?
That is a great question, Maddie. I'm so glad you asked, because that is true. Those are, a raccoon is a nocturnal animal, most often found at night. Same with opossums. But in the spring, a lot of animals like to break those rules that we know because they're opportunistic. So if there's food available during the daytime and they know where it's at and where they can get it, they will be awake during the day sometimes. So, and then also opossums are out mating and having their babies this time of year. So they actually can be found more actively, which is unfortunately sometimes why you do see more of them as roadkill right now, because they're more active coming up here this time of year for mating season. But if you do see one, like usually raccoons, if they are acting erratically, like they'll go round and round in loops or look like they're dizzy. Sometimes they have that bubbles by their mouth. That could mean that they have distemper or rabies. And you would want to definitely give a phone call to the DNR, because oftentimes what they'll do is we'll get those tested so that we know if we have an issue in our area or not. So yeah, always give us a call and we'll talk you through it for sure. But if you see a raccoon during the day, it doesn't necessarily mean that it has rabies or distemper. It may just be out finding food or taking care of its new babies for the springtime. But if it's acting erratically, looks dizzy, spinning in circles, that's usually a sign that there's something wrong with it and it would need some help, as well as getting tested so that we can know if there's an issue in our area.
Lauren, as we wrap up here today, are there any other fun events or programs that you guys are doing with the naturalists at West Bloomfield Parks that you wanted to share with our audience at the time?
Yeah, so we have our outdoor natural play area, which is at our recreation activity center. And there's lots of hands-on learning that happens there, a great sensory garden. And even though it's still winter, there's lots of fun things to play with in there and explore. And then it's connected to our nature room, which has been closed for a long time because it's not that large of a room. But we have been able to slowly open that back up, and families, 1 or 2 families can come in one at a time to explore and meet our animal ambassadors, like our live turtles and our live frogs and things like that. So we do have open hours that are posted on our website at westbloomfieldparks.org. They're free, no registration, so families can come in. Our next open hours is actually tomorrow from 12 to 2. And then if we piqued your interest today, like learning about this rehab situation and how do wildlife rehabbers do it and what do they know, we have a wildlife rehabber that wants to share their knowledge with us. So our naturalist staff teaches a lot of our programs, but it's great to partner with local conservation partners. And we have an instructor coming who was formerly with the DNR, and she is a licensed wildlife rehabilitator. That's April 9th, and she'll be doing a talk for adults all about wildlife rehab, what it entails, and what she does this time of year. So that's a pre-registration, but it is free.
Great. Well, thank you so much for joining us this morning, Lauren. We always appreciate having you on Splash Live.
Thanks, Maddie. Take care and enjoy the start of spring soon here.